Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. I'm Jamie, that's Dave, that's Heath. So week one's always a little weird because the first game is on Thursday, and a lot of people still doing their drafts prior to Thursday. Look, we know you like to wait and make sure all the injury situations are settled. We totally respect you for that. But a lot of you have already had your drafts already, and you're looking to make some waiver wire moves. So we want to combine the two, looking at some draft picks that can help you. Also trying to help you if you're making your waiver moves. So we're looking at average draft position, players that have been drafted after round 10, but also players that are available in typically 65% of leagues or fewer, because that's typically the number we use for our waiver wire suggestions. So we're going to start at the quarterback position, some guys that you could be turning to help you. And as if you're desperate, you know, Tyrod Taylor is the starter now for Houston, but not somebody I think is worth mentioning of guys that could be impactful long-term. So let's start with the quarterbacks here. So we got Trey Lance, Jameis Winston, Ben Roethlisberger, Tua Tagovailoa, and Ryan Fitzpatrick. Lance is the one that has the most upside, clearly. So in one quarterback leagues, if you're looking to draft a backup quarterback, he clearly cannot start for you in week one. But this is more of a long-term play. So Heath, I'll start with you. How excited are you about Trey Lance? And we know he's behind Lawrence, he's behind Justin Fields. Those guys not eligible for this list because they were drafted in too many leagues.
Yeah, I think you just have to look at what Lamar Jackson did his rookie year, what Jalen Hurts did over the final month of the season last year, and whether Trey Lance is ready as a passer yet or not, he could have that type of instant top 12 impact as soon as he gets on the field. He showed us a few things in terms of passing that gave us reason for excitement, but he's not really consistent enough yet. I think if you're going to do this, you need to go in with the idea that I'm going to hold Trey Lance for 6 weeks. I'm going to hold Trey Lance for 8 weeks. Because he could have that league-winning upside, but it'd be awfully frustrating to hold him for 6 weeks, drop him, and then watch him somebody else win the title with him.
And I think two things have to happen. One, obviously Jimmy Garoppolo has to get hurt, which we've seen time and time again. 2 of the last 3 seasons struggle with injuries. The other part of this could be what the Dolphins did last year, where they have a winning team and they just decide, okay, the second guy gives us more upside. Now, it didn't necessarily work, I think, for the Dolphins, but it might work for the 49ers here if Trey Lance is right. And remember, he's still dealing with that finger injury, so just keep an eye on his status for week 1. Dave, the Saints made the quarterback decision to go with Jameis Winston. We're still probably going to see a lot of Taysom Hill in packages, especially with Michael Thomas out. Maybe plays a little bit more wide receiver, tight end, that type of position for them. But in terms of Jameis's long-term appeal, maybe even short-term appeal, because he could be in a shootout with the Packers in week 1, how much do you like Jameis Winston as a number 2 fantasy quarterback with potential number 1 upside?
In a 2-quarterback league or a super flex, I like it a lot. But in a 1-quarterback league, I'm not as excited. I'd much rather spend that roster spot on a Lawrence, a Fields, a Lance. I would even rather have Roethlisberger or Matt Ryan ahead of Jameis Winston because I don't know how long his leash is. What happens when he has a 2 or 3 interception game? And you know it's coming. And they eventually say, all right, enough of you, Jameis. Let's go to Taysom Hill. It's not like it was in Tampa Bay where they had so much invested in him. The Saints don't have that here. So I'm a little nervous about Jameis Winston breaking out, especially since he's sharing work with Taysom Hill. You know Taysom Hill is going to line up at quarterback 5 or 6 times a game near the red zone, take away those high-value opportunities from Jameis Winston. So I'm not nearly as excited as others. From week to week, you want to look at him as a potential starter, be my guest. I don't necessarily love him this week against Green Bay, but in a 2-quarterback league where you got to start a lot of these passers, he's fine for now.
Yeah, you shouldn't start him this week, but if he comes out of this game playing well after a strong preseason game against Jacksonville like we saw a couple weeks ago, he could certainly pique a lot more interest. And again, his roster percentage, he's still available in a lot of leagues, over 38% of leagues on CBSSports.com. Tua Tagovailoa is in that, I think, frame of quarterbacks where we saw the last couple of seasons, young quarterbacks getting weapons. And he's not going to have Will Fuller for week 1. He's suspended, but they give him Will Fuller. They draft Jalen Waddle. They keep Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki. It's a pretty good group, Heath. Can he take that next step as a quarterback in the NFL and maybe as a fantasy quarterback as well?
Yeah, and I think it's more like a Trey Lance situation. Yes, he's starting. No, I don't want to start him week 1 without Will Fuller against the New England Patriots, not at all. But I do like him as a backup quarterback if you have a number 1 that you feel really good about. If you drafted Brady or Rodgers or Tannehill or somebody like that, I think Tua has underrated upside. There wasn't too long ago that we thought he was better than all these young quarterbacks that are getting drafted ahead of him right now. And if Fuller, Parker, Waddle, Gesicki can stay healthy altogether, it's a very good set of weapons.
And just to be fair, and you see Roethlisberger and Fitzpatrick. This is not the only list of guys that we've talked about or will talk about. I wrote about this on CBSSports.com. You can see the whole length of the story here. We just want to give you a little sample size of some guys you could be looking at. So let's now transition to the running back position here, and you see the 5 guys that we're just going to give you a snippet of, but Giovanni Bernard, Ramondre Stevenson, Tyson Williams, Tevin Coleman, and Justin Jackson. We spent enough time on Gio, I think, knowing that he's going to play in the game on Thursday. You know what he is. He's the pass-catching back for the Buccaneers. But Stevenson is one that's certainly interesting, Dave, because after the Patriots make the move to trade Sony Michel, he now should be the backup to Damian Harris. We're going to put James White in a different category because if something happens to Harris, I don't think James White steps into that role. Stevenson should be that guy, and he was great in the preseason. Is he a lottery ticket guy that you want to stash?
He's absolutely one of those guys. Well worth the pick in round 12 plus because we've seen Damian Harris miss time before, and the Patriots have kind of painted themselves into a corner here. If Harris isn't available to play, what are they going to do? They can't lean on James White as a full-time running back for 60 plays. They're going to have to use Stevenson, and he's a load on his feet, and he's got good balance on top of that. I really like the way that he just churned his legs, stayed on his feet. I think that he's got a chance to be good as long as he holds on to the football, and Bill Belichick just keeps learning to trust him and feed him opportunities. I don't think he's going to get a lot as long as Damian Harris is healthy, though. That's the issue.
Yep, and you know, again, it's a Patriots running back, you know, so you never know how this is all going to unfold. They did use J.J. Taylor as well. That could
He's
be part
interesting.
of this, and he's also could be the potential backup. But I think as long as Harris is healthy, James White doing his thing, we may not see a lot of Stevenson, which would be nice because a lot of people certainly drafted more of Harris, more of White, but someone just to keep an eye on just in case something happens to Harris throughout the course of the season. Heath, the big injury, J.K. Dobbins going down, that made Gus Edwards the starter for Baltimore, but Tyson Williams seemingly has earned the number 2 role. So if you are drafting in the next couple of days or have the ability to pick up Tyson Williams, how interested are you in him, maybe in comparison to some of these other guys, Gio, Stevenson, Tevin Coleman, Justin Jackson?
You know, I think he fits in that group. I may be a little bit less excited about him. What it will be interesting to find out, because Gus Edwards the last 2 years, right about 8 or 9 carries per game is what he's averaged. Absolutely nothing in the passing game, but he averages 5 yards per carry, so he has quite a few good yardage games. Now, is it just that all running backs are going to average 5 yards per carry for the Ravens, and Tyson Williams does that as well? Then he's going to be interesting as a flex. I'm not quite as willing to make that bet. I think comparing him to Justin Jackson, I would be more interested in Justin Jackson, just because I feel more confident in that Jackson's going to keep a hold of that role for as long as he's healthy. And Jackson's had 5 games with at least 10 touches in the NFL, averaged over 14 PPR fantasy points in those games. If something happened to Austin Eckler, I think Jackson could take that Eckler role, and maybe you'd see Joshua Kelly in the more the short yardage role.
But imagine if something were to happen to Gus Edwards, what things could be
Oh,
like
for
for
sure,
Tyson
yeah,
Williams, who, let's be honest, I thought he looked pretty good in the preseason. And it was the preseason, but he accelerated quickly. He had good balance. He had good agility, good leg power. He was a good pass protector in the preseason. Now, that's not something that necessarily has to happen in Baltimore all the time, but he's someone who can work in the passing game when they decide to lean on a running back who's good in that situation. I think he could do it. So somebody who can get 8-9 carries per game for now, and then if Gus stinks or if Gus gets hurt, we're going to be riding the Tyson bus instead of the Gus bus.
And look, for what it's worth, Tyson Williams is the popular of the 2 guys with Justice Hill. There was the report that the Ravens put in a claim for Royce Freeman when he was released as well. Panthers actually are the team that claimed him. So maybe they're not thrilled with their group as a whole behind Gus Edwards, so that could be an indictment on Tyson Williams. I think it's more just adding another body. Somebody's played in the NFL, but still just something to keep in mind that they did try to pick up another veteran who was available, and that still could be the case as the season unfolds. Remember, after week 1, salary's not guaranteed, so we could see somebody like an Adrian Peterson, a Le'Veon Bell, Duke Johnson, the guys that are still out there. Hopefully not for Gus Edwards' sake and maybe for Tyson Williams' sake, but just keep that in mind. Real quick, Tevin Coleman, Ty Johnson, which Jets backup running back would you rather have?
I'd rather have Ty Johnson. I think he looked better in the preseason. I think he's more elusive.
I'll go with Tevin Coleman. I think he has a better chance of scoring touchdowns.
I think Coleman gets the first opportunity. Ty Johnson may end up being better, but the bottom line is hopefully Michael Carter is the best Jets running back.
Thank you.
Because that's something we would like to see.
Yes.
Let's go now to the wide receivers here and some guys that you could be drafting in round 10 or later or still picking up off the waiver wire. Darnell Mooney, Mike Williams, Elijah Moore, Henry Ruggs, and Terrace Marshall. So, Dave, when you look at Darnell Mooney and what he was able to accomplish last season, close the season strong, 15 PPR points or more in 2 of his final 3 games, they put him in bubble wrap. They didn't want him to play in the preseason, so that's a good sign because he's the number 2 receiver opposite Allen Robinson. Now, they did bring in Rashad Perryman. They have Marquise Goodwin, a couple of veteran guys that are going to be in what I think is a pretty pegged role, the speed threat for, the third receiver spot there. But Mooney looks like a guy who could pick up some big production in his sophomore campaign.
Mooney is also a speed receiver, and I think
but not at the level of the other 2.
Well, I don't know yet. I think he might end up being there, and I think the Bears might.
What I'm getting at is he's going to do more than what Rashad Perryman and
as far as like a deep threat guy.
Yeah,
that's where I was going too. Is that he's definitely good as a downfield threat, but he's also a good short and mid-range target. And I'm not really interested in starting him as long as Andy Dalton's the quarterback. But when it's Justin Fields, I think Fields can just utilize his legs out of the pocket, and that'll help get Mooney open because defenses are going to adjust to that. They're going to be worried about Fields being a runner, and they're going to go after Fields, and I think that'll make Mooney a guy that can get a lot of numbers after the catch. So I'm benching him for now, but I really want to make sure that I've got him on my team. He's one of those guys I think could have a big second half.
I'll be really interested to see what his target share is like this week because Allen Robinson gets Jalen Ramsey. Last year when they faced each other, Robinson had a decent game, but he only saw 4 targets. If he's only getting 4 targets in this game, that should be 8 to 10 targets for Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, Robinson's in kind of that Ezekiel Elliott boat, where you're going to start him. You
Right.
should start him, but, may not have a great game because Ramsey is the best cornerback in the NFL. Heath, Mike Williams is in that group of wide receivers we spent a lot of time talking about guys who maybe started at one place in the preseason and training camp and then saw their average draft position fall, saw their rankings fall because of injury. Spent a lot of time on the sidelines dealing with a hip pointer, but he's back ready for week 1. I think, again, he falls in that category like Devontae Parker in 2019 with the Dolphins, Corey Davis with the Titans in 2020, a team not picking up the 5th-year option on a high first-round pick, and now he has a chance to maybe redeem himself. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case for Mike Williams, but do you still have interest in Mike Williams if now you're drafting knowing he's healthy and maybe even starting him this week in what seems to be a pretty tough matchup against the Washington football team?
Yeah, I want to have Mike Williams on my bench. I want to keep Mike Williams on my bench for this week against Washington. But I do think that there's, like you talk about all those other guys, the difference is Mike Williams has already given us a 1,000-yard season and a 10-touchdown season. He's averaged 9.5 yards per target. He just hasn't got enough targets in his career. And part of that's him not being able to stay fully healthy. But I do think with all the talk we had this offseason about how they wanted to get Mike Williams more involved and how they expected his targets to go up, if that happens, if he gets 110 targets in a season and maintains his efficiency, he's going to be a steal where people are drafting him.
And look, the tight end situation's in flux for them. Jared Cook, Donald Parham, they're replacing Hunter Henry. We'll see how that changes in the offense. Josh Palmer, somebody that they like. Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler are getting their targets, but Mike Williams still has an opportunity to maybe be their best red zone threat, and hopefully Justin Herbert will lean on him in that regard, maybe get back to that 10-touchdown threshold. All right, I love Elijah Moore. Dave, you love Elijah Moore. Heath, I think you love Elijah Moore as well. It seems like he's just going criminally undrafted at this point, and probably somebody who should be picked up across the board in all leagues. Even though Corey Davis has stolen the spotlight for the Jets receiving corps, remember, at the start of training camp, it was Elijah Moore's show, and then he had the quad injury. He's back. He's ready to go for week 1. Don't know how great it'll be against the Panthers, but should be on basically everybody's roster, in my opinion.
You got to wait and see. But I think he ends up playing a sizable role in week 1 because we know that Jamison Crowder is on the COVID list. And
they did say that he might be able to play them.
We'll wait and see. But even if Crowder plays, I think Elijah Moore has a gig as an outside receiver. And if Crowder doesn't play, then Moore can line up inside or outside. I love the skill set. I think the Jets are going to have to throw a lot this year. I don't think their defense is particularly good. And I was impressed by Zach Wilson in the preseason. He didn't throw a lot of passes, only 20 of them. 1 was off target. So Zach Wilson showed me something in the preseason, and I think Moore fits in with Wilson. Wilson's a little bit like Justin Fields in that he's a movable piece outside of the pocket. Moore can adapt to that a lot better than I think Corey Davis can. I think this might be the best receiver on the Jets. I'm taking him in round 10, and I know his ADP is way below that.
Yeah, and again, you should be putting him on your roster if he's still available because there is a ton of upside in this Jets offense for him because they need somebody to catch the ball. It can't just be all of Corey Davis. And again, Crowder, Denzel Mims, Tyler Kroft, Keelan Cole. They like all these guys to whatever extent. But Moore and Davis look to be the best too, and Moore just not on enough rosters, in my opinion, as well. The tight ends that we're keeping an eye on that could be available for you late, or also that you should be drafting with late-round picks, and these are more flyers at this point, but Zach Ertz, he might still be the best tight end for the Eagles now that he's staying on the team. Gerald Everett is going to compete with Will Dissly to be the starting tight end there for the Seahawks long-term, but Russell Wilson loves him. Hunter Henry could be the best tight end for the Patriots. We'll see how that happens in tandem with Jonnu Smith. Austin Hooper we talked about a little bit earlier, and Anthony Ferkser, as Dave said, could have a good opportunity in week 1, but somebody who has to step up after what was basically a nondescript preseason for him. So just quickly, Dave, who's your favorite guy on this list?
My favorite guy on this list is going to end up being Gerald Everett.
Why?
Because I think he's got a good opportunity to be third in targets on a weekly basis for Seattle, and I like the matchup for him in week 1. But the guy who's not on that list, who I think might be even better, is Jared Cook playing for the Chargers.
Okay.
I think he could end up being better.
Who's your favorite guy?
Austin Hooper would be mine. Even when Odell Beckham was there last year, he was on pace for 90 targets, 5.5 targets per game. Just had a terrible efficiency year. He also had an appendectomy last year. They put a couple games in a blizzard. I think Austin Hooper is going to bounce back this year and be a top 12 tight end.
I guess I'll go with Ertz, even though he's the most rostered at this point. But if he's better than Dallas Goedert, we've been drafting Goddard as a top 10 tight end at some point this offseason. And look, the fact that they kept Ertz was a big surprise to me. I thought they were going to move on from him. He's still on the roster. Everything seems to be fine. And he still may be the more talented of the 2 tight ends. So frustrating situation for those of you who have drafted Dallas Goedert. I hope it works out still, but Zach Ertz may be the best pass catcher for Philadelphia this season, and that would not be a huge surprise given what he's been to this team over the course of his career. Want more of the Fantasy Football Today podcast and nonstop year-round fantasy advice? It's simple. Hit the subscribe button and hang with us all throughout the year.